Ambassador Vextar straightened his ceremonial robes and tried to ignore the fact that his 3 hearts were beating in completely different rhythms. This was not how he'd imagined his diplomatic career would go when he graduated summa cum laude from the Rigelian Academy of Interstellar Relations. Back then, he thought he'd be mediating trade disputes and negotiating mining rights. He never expected to be standing before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, trying to explain why they were all collectively wetting themselves over something from a backwater planet called Earth. The Galactic Council chamber stretched before him like a monument to bureaucratic intimidation. Floating observation pods housed representatives from 437 different species, all waiting for answers he didn't have. And in the center ring, looking about as dignified as a group of cosmic horrors could manage, while clearly fighting panic attacks, sat the 7 Worlds Apex Predator Alliance. These were supposed to be the most feared creatures in known space, the kinds of beings that ate entire star systems for breakfast and used black holes as footstools. Children across the galaxy had nightmares about them. Entire civilizations paid tribute just to keep them from noticing their existence, and right now, they looked like they'd rather be anywhere else in the universe. Vextar cleared his primary throat and activated the translation matrix. Esteemed council members, we are here today to address what can only be described as an unprecedented crisis in galactic security. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. In the 7th row, the Andromedan delegates' eye stalks drooped with what Vextar recognized as second-hand embarrassment. For the past standard cycle, he continued, the 7 Worlds Alliance has reported a series of incidents involving what they claim is a weapon of mass destruction deployed by the species known as humans. The snickering started in the outer rings and worked its way inward. Everyone knew humans, cute little bipedal mammals who'd barely figured out faster-than-light travel and spent most of their time arguing about imaginary lines on their planetary surface. The idea that they possessed anything that could threaten the Alliance was like suggesting a fruit fly could take down a space dragon. Razorfang Prime, current spokesperson for the Alliance and a creature that looked like someone had crossed a Tyrannosaurus with an industrial shredder, shifted uncomfortably in his reinforced hover chair. His reputation as the terror of the Outer Rim was taking a serious hit, and everyone in the chamber knew it. The weapon, Vextar continued, reading from his notes and wishing he'd gone into accounting instead, has been described by the Alliance as, quote, small, loud, and completely unreasonable, end quote. It apparently travels with an accomplice that they describe as, quote, pure, concentrated evil in a compact package, end quote. The chamber erupted in barely contained laughter. The cetacean representative actually started making those clicking sounds that passed for chuckling in their species. Even the normally stoic silicon-based collective was flickering in what could charitably be called amusement. Vextar raised his primary appendage for silence. Furthermore, this weapon appears to be capable of interdimensional travel, shows complete immunity to standard intimidation protocols, and according to these reports, actually petted the scourge of Kepler 4142. The laughter died. Being petted by your enemies was the kind of humiliation that ended careers in their line of work. The Alliance is requesting immediate intervention to contain this threat before it compromises galactic security further. Vextar set down his notes and looked at the assembled beings with the expression of someone who'd rather be explaining quantum physics to a brick. They're asking us to declare war on a species that, according to our intelligence, considers nuclear weapons to be their most advanced military technology. And that, thought Vextar, as he watched 7 of the most feared predators in the galaxy try to sink lower in their chairs, was how he ended up with the worst diplomatic assignment in recorded history. All because nobody had bothered to ask the important question. If these creatures were truly apex predators, what exactly did that make whatever was hunting them? The answer, as he was about to discover, was far worse than anyone could have imagined. Meanwhile, approximately 47,000 light-years away, in a suburban neighborhood that would make the Galactic Council question everything they thought they knew about weapons of mass destruction, Luna Martinez was having a perfectly normal Tuesday morning. Well, normal by her standards, which admittedly had become somewhat flexible since she'd started middle school and her mom had gotten that new job at the definitely not a government research facility down the street. "Come on, Pancakes," she called, shouldering her backpack and checking her phone for the 3rd time. "We're going to be late for school again, and Mrs. Henderson already thinks I'm weird." The creature that emerged from behind the garden shed would have made Ambassador Vextar require immediate medical attention. Pancakes looked like a honey badger, mostly because he was a honey badger. But somewhere along the evolutionary chain, someone had clearly forgotten to mention that honey badgers weren't supposed to casually violate the laws of physics on their morning walks. He padded over to Luna with the kind of swagger that suggested he owned not just the neighborhood but possibly several dimensions, and definitely didn't care about your opinion on the matter. His dark eyes held an intelligence that would have been unsettling if Luna hadn't been too busy trying to untangle her earbuds to notice. "I know you don't like the leash," she said, clipping it to his collar. "But remember what happened last time? You disappeared for 3 hours and came back with that weird blue stuff in your fur. Mom still thinks it was paint from the Hendersons' fence." Pancakes gave her a look that clearly communicated his thoughts on leashes, authority in general, and the cosmic insignificance of human concerns. Then he promptly phased through the leash and started walking toward the street, because apparently molecular cohesion was more of a suggestion than a rule when it came to his daily routine. "Oh, come on," Luna sighed, jogging to catch up. "You know that creeps out the neighbors." This was something of an understatement. The neighbors had stopped asking questions after the incident, where Pancakes had somehow gotten onto the Hendersons' roof, despite the fact that their ladder was in the garage, and honey badgers weren't known for their climbing abilities, or their apparent ability to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, which several residents swore they'd witnessed during the Great Garbage Can incident of last month. As they walked, Luna chattered about her upcoming science project while Pancakes occasionally stopped to investigate things that weren't visible to human perception. To Luna, these pauses just looked like normal animal behavior. She didn't notice that he was actually sampling the local space-time continuum for structural weaknesses, or that his casual sniffing of Mrs. Peterson's mailbox was causing minor fluctuations in the neighborhood's gravitational field. "I was thinking about doing something on parallel dimensions," Luna continued, stepping over a crack in the sidewalk that definitely hadn't been glowing yesterday. "You know, like those science fiction movies where people travel to different worlds? Wouldn't that be cool?" Pancake paused mid-step and gave her what could charitably be called an amused look. In his experience, parallel dimensions were less cool science fiction concept and more Tuesday morning commute, but humans had such adorable misconceptions about the nature of reality. They'd reached the corner where Luna usually said goodbye and headed to school, but today something was different. The air around her mom's shed seemed to be doing that weird shimmery thing it had been doing lately, like heat waves but colder and with more sense of impending cosmic significance. "That's new," Luna said, adjusting her backpack straps. "Think it's broken?" Pancake tilted his head, considering. In his assessment, the interdimensional portal generator that Dr. Martinez had definitely not been building in the family shed was working perfectly. Perhaps too perfectly, given that it was currently creating stable wormholes to 7 different galactic coordinates without any apparent input from its supposedly human operator. What happened next would later be described in Galactic Council records as the moment everything went sideways, though that was a considerable understatement. Luna, being 12 and therefore constitutionally incapable of leaving mysterious shimmery things alone, reached out to touch the air near the shed. Pancakes, being a honey badger with an apparent PhD in applied chaos theory, decided this seemed like an excellent time for an adventure. The last thing the Henderson security camera recorded before experiencing what its manufacturer would later classify as impossible technical failure was a perfectly ordinary girl and her definitely not ordinary pet stepping through what looked like empty air and disappearing entirely. What it didn't record was Luna's delighted, "Oh my God, this is so much cooler than the bus," or Pancake's expression of deep satisfaction as he finally found something interesting to do before lunch. The 7 worlds were about to discover that their problems had just gotten considerably worse. Luna Martinez stepped out of what she was pretty sure had been her backyard shed and into what was definitely not her neighborhood. The landscape stretched before her like something out of a heavy metal album cover designed by someone with serious anger management issues. Jagged obsidian spires pierced a blood-red sky, while rivers of molten something or other carved glowing channels through terrain that looked like it had been personally offended by the concept of hospitality. "Okay," she said, adjusting her backpack and looking around with the kind of casual interest most people reserved for new shopping malls. "This is definitely not the way to school." Pancake emerged beside her, took one look at the hellscape of crystallized volcanic fury that was supposed to strike terror into the hearts of cosmic travelers, and yawned. He'd seen worse on his Tuesday morning walks. The dimensional energy here tasted like artificial cherry, which was disappointing but not unexpected. What neither of them noticed was the massive fortress built into the largest obsidian spire, or the thousands of razor-sharp monitoring devices that had immediately locked onto their position, or the fact that every alarm system within a 50-mile radius was now screaming warnings that roughly translated to, "Oh no, oh no, oh no, the thing is here!" Inside the Fortress of Eternal Screaming, as it was listed on galactic tourism websites that no one in their right mind ever visited, Razorfang Prime was having what future psychiatrists would classify as a complete existential breakdown. He was 20 feet of perfectly evolved killing machine, with claws that could slice through starship hulls, teeth that had been personally sharpened on the bones of lesser predators, and a reputation that made grown civilizations wet themselves. His lair was a monument to successful intimidation, decorated with the skulls of anyone who'd ever thought they were tougher than him. He had not spent 3 centuries building his brand just to have it ruined by whatever fresh nightmare had just strolled onto his planet like they owned the place. The monitoring screens showed him everything he needed to know and nothing he wanted to see. A small bipedal creature in what appeared to be primitive textile coverings, accompanied by something that looked like the kind of vermin his species had evolved specifically to hunt. They were just standing there, looking around like tourists who'd gotten off at the wrong stop. "This is not happening," Razorfang Prime muttered, watching Luna pull out her phone and start taking pictures. "This is absolutely not happening to me." But it was happening, and it got worse when Luna noticed his fortress and started walking toward it with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she was planning to knock on the door and ask for directions. "I should kill them immediately," he told himself, activating his personal war suit and checking his weapon systems. Quick, efficient, no witnesses. Problem solved. The logical part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive through countless battles and political coups, was screaming at him to do exactly that. The other part, the part that remembered the reports from his fellow Alliance members, was whispering that maybe, just maybe, he should consider relocating to another galaxy instead. He chose what he thought was the middle ground. He would emerge from his fortress in full battle regalia, demonstrate his overwhelming superiority and frighten them away before things could escalate. It was a solid plan that showed appropriate caution while maintaining his reputation. The plan lasted exactly 12 seconds. Luna looked up as the fortress gates exploded outward, and a creature that belonged in humanity's worst nightmares came charging toward them with enough firepower to level a small city. Her first thought was not fear, or terror, or any of the appropriate responses to finding yourself face to face with a galactic apex predator. Her first thought was, "Oh wow, he's like a really big angry dog." Her second thought was, "I wonder if he's friendly." Her third thought, which she acted on before her survival instincts could file a formal complaint, was, "I should totally pet him." Razorfang Prime's charge came to an abrupt halt as the small bipedal creature stepped forward, made a series of what could only be described as friendly cooing noises, and reached out toward his armored snout with the kind of fearless confidence that suggested either complete insanity or something far worse. "Who's a good boy?" Luna said, because in her experience, this was the appropriate greeting for all creatures with more than 2 legs and impressive dental work. "Are you a good boy? I bet you're a good boy." The terror of 7 systems, the scourge of the Outer Rim, the creature whose name was synonymous with inevitable doom across 4 galactic quadrants, found himself frozen in place as a tiny alien hand patted his snout with the gentle affection usually reserved for beloved household pets. It was, without question, the most humiliating moment of his 300-year career. "Luna," came a voice that seemed to rumble up from the planet's core. "Bathroom. Now." Razorfang Prime looked down to see the smaller creature, the one he'd dismissed as harmless vermin, fixing him with a stare that suggested he'd just been categorized as a minor inconvenience standing between pancakes and his immediate goals. "Oh, do you know where the bathroom is?" Luna asked brightly, still petting the galactic apex predator like he was a particularly large golden retriever. "Pancakes really needs to go, and I don't want him to have an accident." What followed was a series of events that would require an entire team of xenopsychologists to properly document. Pancakes, having determined that the local architecture was insufficiently intimidating, began methodically redesigning it according to his own aesthetic preferences. This involved a process that looked like casual wandering, but resulted in several load-bearing walls developing critical structural failures. Luna, meanwhile, continued her exploration of the fortress with the enthusiastic curiosity of someone who'd just discovered the world's most elaborate playground. She took selfies with priceless artifacts of conquest, used ancient weapons of mass destruction as jungle gyms, and at one point somehow managed to activate the fortress's sound system, filling the entire structure with what her generation called music and everyone else classified as psychological warfare. Razor Fang Prime, still paralyzed by the cosmic injustice of his situation, could only watch as centuries of carefully cultivated menace crumbled around him like a badly constructed sandcastle. The end came when Luna found what she was looking for. "Oh, good," she said, heading toward a doorway that definitely hadn't been glowing with interdimensional energy 5 minutes ago. "Another one of those portal thingies. Come on, pancakes, we're going to be super late now." They stepped through the portal with the casual ease of seasoned interdimensional travelers, leaving behind a fortress that looked like it had been renovated by a tornado with ADHD and an apex predator who was seriously considering a career change. In the sudden silence, Razorfang Prime sat down heavily on his ruined throne and began composing his resignation letter to the Alliance. Some things, he realized, were simply beyond the scope of traditional predator-prey relationships. He just hoped the next world would fare better than his had. What happened next could only be described as a cosmic comedy of errors, if cosmic comedies typically involved the systematic deconstruction of galactic power structures by a middle schooler and her pet, who had apparently minored in applied chaos theory. World 2 belonged to Crystal Mantis, Queen Sharpedge, a creature that had evolved in the heart of a dying star and considered diamond to be a light snack. Her entire planet was her body, a living crystal matrix that had devoured 3 solar systems and was working on a 4th. She was, by all reasonable measures, indestructible. Luna emerged from the portal onto what looked like the inside of the world's most expensive jewelry store, if jewelry stores typically came with gravity that could crush starships and temperatures that could melt tungsten. "Oh wow," she said, completely unbothered by the fact that she should have been instantly vaporized. "It's like Elsa's palace, but way more extra." Pancakes took one look at the crystalline landscape, walked over to what appeared to be a decorative wall formation and took a bite. The wall, which happened to be part of Crystal Mantis Queen Sharpedge's left shoulder, crunched like a particularly satisfying potato chip. The Queen's scream of outrage shook 3 neighboring star systems. No one had ever damaged her crystal matrix. No one had ever even tried, mostly because trying typically resulted in immediate molecular disintegration. "Bad pancakes," Luna said, not looking up from her phone where she was trying to get a good selfie angle with the pretty crystal formations. "We talked about eating things that aren't food." Pancake gave her the honey badger equivalent of a shrug and continued his systematic sampling of what was supposed to be the hardest substance in known space. Each bite produced a sound like breaking wind chimes, which he found aesthetically pleasing. By the time Luna found the next portal, Pancakes had eaten roughly half of the Queen's torso and was working on what might have been her spleen. Crystal Mantis Queen Sharpedge, meanwhile, was experiencing her first existential crisis in 4 billion years and seriously considering therapy. World 3 was having an even worse day. The Shadow Leviathan had ruled from the spaces between dimensions for eons, feeding on the fears of lesser beings and maintaining power through careful manipulation of darkness itself. His realm existed in the gaps between light, where terror grew like a living thing and sanity went to die. Luna stepped out of the portal into absolute darkness and immediately pulled out her phone. No signal," she muttered, turning on her flashlight to check for bars. The beam of LED light cut through the Shadow Leviathan's domain like a sword through silk, revealing a landscape that suddenly looked less like an otherworldly nightmare and more like someone's unfinished basement with delusions of grandeur. The Shadow Leviathan himself, a creature of pure malevolent darkness who had never encountered artificial illumination, took one look at the blazing rectangle in Luna's hand and began what could charitably be called strategic retreating. "Oh, cool. It's like a haunted house," Luna said, walking forward while casually waving her phone around to get better lighting for her photos. "Pancakes, look at this place. It's so atmospheric." Behind her, Pancakes was investigating a pile of what the Shadow Leviathan had believed were the crystallized screams of his victims. They turned out to be surprisingly crunchy and tasted faintly of cotton candy, which was disappointing but not entirely unexpected. The Shadow Leviathan, watching his centuries of carefully cultivated mystique evaporate under the harsh glare of consumer electronics, decided that maybe ruling dimensions was overrated anyway. World 4 presented volcanic Drake Molten Core with what he initially thought might be a manageable situation. He was a creature of living flame and molten rock, immune to heat and capable of swimming through lava like it was bathwater. Surely he could handle 2 small organic beings. This confidence lasted until Pancakes discovered that the Drake's personal lava pools were exactly the right temperature for a relaxing soak, and promptly turned the terror of the magma fields into an unwilling spa host. "Seems to like you," Luna observed, taking pictures of pancakes floating contentedly in what should have been instantly fatal molten rock, while the volcanic drake hovered nearby in a state of complete bewilderment. "This is not how apex predation is supposed to work," Molten Core muttered, watching a honey badger use his tail as a pool noodle. World 5 was where things got really interesting. Mindbender Supreme had spent millennia perfecting the art of psychological warfare, capable of driving entire civilizations insane with a single thought. His telepathic abilities could shatter minds across star systems and reduce cosmic emperors to gibbering wrecks. He took one look into Luna's thoughts and immediately regretted every life choice that had led to this moment. Her mind was full of things like homework anxiety, wondering if Jake from her English class liked her back, concern about whether she'd remembered to feed her fish, and an ongoing internal debate about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It was the mental equivalent of being force-fed cotton candy while someone played boy band music at maximum volume. "Make it stop," Mindbender Supreme whispered, clutching his massive cranium as Luna's thoughts about her upcoming book report on To Kill a Mockingbird began to overwrite his carefully constructed psychic defenses. "Did you say something?" Luna asked, looking around the crystalline cave that served as his throne room. "This place has terrible acoustics." Meanwhile, Pancakes had discovered that the Mindbender's collection of crystallized thoughts made excellent chew toys, despite their alleged infinite value to students of xenopsychology. World 6 belonged to the Void Stalker, a creature that existed partially outside normal spacetime and fed on the life force of entire planets. He was darkness given form, entropy with teeth, the kind of cosmic horror that made seasoned space marines retire to quiet farming planets. Luna took one look at him and said, "Oh, you're like a big space cat. Here, kitty kitty." The Void Stalker, who had never been called kitty in his 17-billion-year existence, found himself experiencing emotions he didn't have names for as Luna scratched behind what might have been his ears. "You're Mr. Whiskers now," she declared with the absolute authority that only 12-year-olds could muster. "Do you like belly rubs, Mr. Whiskers?" The answer, as it turned out, was yes. The Void Stalker did like belly rubs, though he would never admit this to the other Alliance members. World 7 was the final stop, home to the cosmic horror beyond description, a being so alien and terrible that looking upon its true form supposedly drove observers instantly mad. It existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and communicated through controlled reality distortions that could reshape local physics. Luna met it, had a brief conversation that mostly consisted of her doing all the talking while it listened in growing horror, and then pulled out her diary to write down her thoughts. "Day got weird," she wrote, while the cosmic horror beyond description watched in fascination. "Went to some really cool places today. Met this thing that's kinda like my Uncle Jerry but with more tentacles and better manners. Pancakes ate some stuff he probably shouldn't have but seems fine. Still haven't finished my science project. Mom's gonna kill me." The cosmic horror beyond description realized that being reduced to a diary entry comparing it to someone's uncle was somehow worse than any fate it had previously imagined. It briefly considered ascending to a higher dimensional plane just to escape the psychological damage. By the time Luna and Pancakes stepped through the final portal back toward what they hoped was home, they had left behind 7 of the most feared creatures in the galaxy in various states of existential crisis, identity confusion, and what therapists would later classify as profound ontological uncertainty. The 7 Worlds Apex Predator Alliance, as a political entity, effectively ceased to exist that Tuesday morning, not because they had been conquered or destroyed, but because they were all too embarrassed to return each other's calls. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador Vexstar was discovering that diplomatic immunity didn't protect against stress-induced molting. His ceremonial robes were now decorated with patches of shed scales, and his third heart had given up entirely and was just making disappointed, whimpering sounds. The emergency session had been called after reports started flooding in from all 7 Alliance worlds simultaneously. The reports made no sense individually and even less sense collectively, but they all shared certain common elements that made Vexstar question his life choices and consider early retirement. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," he said, reviewing his notes while the 7 worlds' representatives tried to avoid eye contact with each other. "A small human child and her companion somehow visited all 7 of your worlds in the span of a single planetary rotation. This child apparently petted Razorfang Prime, fed Crystal Mantis Queen Sharpedge to her pet, turned the Shadow Leviathan's domain into a photo opportunity, converted Volcanic Drake Molten Core into a spa facility, gave Mindbender Supreme what I can only describe as a migraine of cosmic proportions, renamed the Voidstalker Mr. Whiskers, and compared the cosmic horror beyond description to her Uncle Jerry. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that entire civilizations could build monuments to. In our defense, Razorfang Prime finally managed. She was very friendly about it. This was when the Alliance made what historians would later record as the worst tactical decision since the Andromedans tried to negotiate with a black hole. They decided to take matters into their own tentacles, claws, and various other appendages. The plan, such as it was, involved tracking down Luna and Pancakes using the combined resources of 7 apex predator civilizations, capturing them through overwhelming force and then negotiating from a position of strength. It was the kind of plan that looked brilliant on paper and catastrophic everywhere else. They found Luna in her backyard, sitting on her porch swing and working on what appeared to be homework while Pancakes napped in a patch of sunlight that definitely hadn't been exhibiting temporal distortions before their interdimensional field trip. Target acquired, transmitted Crystal Mantis Queen Sharp Edge, her voice slightly hoarse from having half her crystalline matrix eaten, initiating capture protocols. The operation began with what the Alliance considered subtle surveillance, which involved 7 massive alien craft materializing in Earth's atmosphere simultaneously. This had the immediate effect of causing every government on the planet to collectively wet themselves, but Luna just looked up from her math homework and waved. "Oh cool," she said. "They came back. I wonder if Mr. Whiskers is with them." Phase 2 of the operation called for intimidation through superior technology. The ships deployed their most advanced scanning arrays, weapons systems, and psychological warfare equipment in a coordinated show of overwhelming force designed to demonstrate exactly how outmatched any resistance would be. Luna pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. "Mom is never going to believe this," she said, adjusting the angle to get better lighting on the Voidstalker's ship. "This is way cooler than that time the ice cream truck played music." Pancakes opened one eye, assessed the situation with the casual interest of someone who had already won a game the other players didn't know they were playing, and went back to sleep. Phase 3 was the actual capture attempt, which began promisingly and went downhill faster than a honey badger in a gravity well. The Alliance had prepared specialized containment fields, dimensional locks, and reality anchors specifically designed to prevent interdimensional travel. They had backup plans for their backup plans and contingencies for their contingencies. They were as ready as 7 cosmic apex predators could possibly be. They were not ready for Luna to assume this was all an elaborate surprise birthday party. "This is so much better than laser tag," she said, climbing aboard Razorfang Prime's flagship with the enthusiasm of someone who had been personally invited. "Did my mom set this up? She's always complaining I don't make enough friends." The Alliance found themselves in the unprecedented situation of being boarded by their own target, who was now giving them a tour of their own ship while pointing out interesting design features and asking if they had snacks. "The engineering is really impressive," Luna continued, wandering through corridors that were supposed to strike terror into the hearts of lesser beings. "Are those laser cannons? They look just like the ones in Star Wars. Do they make the same sound effects?" Pancakes, meanwhile, had discovered that the ship's gravity generators made excellent playground equipment. The fact that his casual interaction with the machinery was causing localized space-time hiccups throughout the vessel was either a bonus or a catastrophe, depending on your perspective. "This is not a social visit," Mindbender Supreme attempted to communicate telepathically, only to be immediately overwhelmed by Luna's excitement about missing school and her genuine curiosity about alien technology. "Can you read minds?" she asked out loud. "That's so cool. What am I thinking about right now?" The answer was apparently her upcoming geography test, the fact that she'd forgotten to charge her tablet the night before, and whether the aliens had anything resembling pizza. Mindbender Supreme, who had expected thoughts of fear or desperation, instead found himself being asked for study tips and restaurant recommendations. The situation deteriorated further when the Alliance attempted to demonstrate their seriousness by powering up their weapons systems. The combined firepower of 7 apex predator civilizations, charging simultaneously, should have been enough to crack a small moon. Instead, it caused every light on Luna's street to flicker, which made her concerned about her neighbor Mrs. Peterson, who was apparently afraid of power outages. "You guys should probably be more careful with the electricity stuff," Luna advised, having somehow made her way to what appeared to be the bridge of the flagship. "Mrs. Peterson has one of those machines that helps her breathe, and if the power goes out, she gets really worried." The Alliance looked at each other with the dawning realization that their brilliant plan had not accounted for the possibility that their target would be more concerned about an elderly neighbor's respiratory equipment than about being kidnapped by galactic apex predators. This was when Ambassador Vexstar's emergency diplomatic override kicked in, automatically connecting him to the flagship's communications system. "This is Ambassador Vexstar of the Galactic Council," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of 437 civilizations and at least 3 different antacid medications. "We are prepared to negotiate a peaceful resolution to this situation." Luna perked up. "Oh, is this like a model United Nations thing? We did that at school last year. I was Belgium." And that was how Ambassador Vexstar found himself trying to conduct interstellar diplomacy with someone who thought the fate of galactic civilization could be resolved through parliamentary procedure, and who kept asking if they were going to have snacks during the negotiations. The Alliance, meanwhile, was discovering that their most advanced containment systems were about as effective against their targets as a strongly worded letter. Pancakes had somehow managed to turn their dimensional locks into a comfortable sleeping arrangement, while Luna was making friends with their ship's AI and teaching it Earth pop songs. By the time the flagship's navigation system started playing Baby Shark on repeat through every speaker in the vessel, the Alliance had unanimously voted to surrender. The problem was figuring out how to surrender to someone who didn't realize there had been a war. Ambassador Vexstar would later describe the final negotiations as the most surreal diplomatic experience in recorded galactic history, which was saying something considering he'd once mediated a peace treaty between sentient mathematics and a species that communicated exclusively through interpretive dance. Luna finally figured out what was happening when Razorfang Prime, in a moment of complete desperation, actually explained the situation to her. "Wait," she said, looking around at 7 of the most feared creatures in the galaxy who were all avoiding eye contact like kindergartners caught eating glue. "You're all scared of me? That's hilarious. Why didn't you just say so?" The Alliance tried to explain concepts like galactic dominance, apex predator hierarchies, and cosmic power structures to someone whose biggest concern that morning had been whether she'd remembered her lunch money. "So basically, your bullies hurt," Luna summarized with the devastating clarity that only 12-year-olds could manage. "And you're upset because you can't bully me and Pancakes? That's kind of pathetic, don't you think?" This observation hit the Alliance like a meteor made of pure existential dread. What followed was less a negotiation and more a combination group therapy session and cosmic intervention. Luna, with the casual wisdom of someone who'd grown up watching superhero movies, explained that maybe they should try being nice instead of scary, and perhaps consider hobbies that didn't involve terrorizing entire civilizations. The official resolution, as recorded in Galactic Council archives, established several new precedents in interstellar law. Pancakes was formally appointed Supreme Overlord of Everything, a title he acknowledged by rolling over and demanding belly rubs from the Voidstalker. Luna was designated as his official translator and diplomatic representative, which mainly involved her explaining that Pancakes didn't actually care about ruling anything as long as people left him alone and occasionally provided snacks. The former Apex Predator Alliance was restructured into what Luna cheerfully named the Galactic Friendship Club, with mandatory weekly video calls where they had to share something nice that happened to them. Mindbender Supreme discovered he had a talent for poetry, while Crystal Mantis Queen Sharp Edge started a very successful jewelry business. Ambassador Vexstar, suffering from what physicians classified as acute bureaucratic trauma disorder, accepted a new position as Director of Interdimensional Tourism, a job that mainly involved putting up warning signs and maintaining a comprehensive insurance policy. The paperwork alone for accidental conquest by Minor and Mustelid required an entirely new department at the Galactic Council, staffed by beings who specialized in impossible scenarios and therapeutic counseling for former apex predators. Luna returned home just in time for dinner, where her mother asked about her day with the distracted concern of a parent who worked in quantum physics and had long since stopped questioning the weird things that happened around their house. "Oh, you know," Luna said, setting the table while Pancakes sprawled across his favorite sunbeam spot. "Made some new friends, learned about galactic politics, accidentally became a diplomatic representative. The usual." Her mother nodded absently and mentioned that the neighbors had complained about some unusual aircraft in the area, but Luna shouldn't worry about it because the Homeowners Association was handling the situation. As for Pancakes, he had achieved the ultimate honey badger dream. He was now technically the most powerful being in 7 galaxies, and absolutely no one expected him to do anything about it. He could sleep wherever he wanted, eat whatever caught his interest, and occasionally receive tribute, in the form of premium snacks, from creatures who used to consider themselves the masters of space and time. It was, he reflected while drifting off to sleep in a patch of sunlight that was definitely exhibiting some interesting gravitational anomalies, a pretty good Tuesday. The universe, meanwhile, had learned an important lesson about the dangers of underestimating species that hadn't yet figured out they were supposed to be impressed by cosmic horror. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was a 12-year-old girl who treated everything like a new adventure, and a honey badger who simply didn't care about your opinion on the matter. And somewhere in the Galactic Council archives, filed under incidents that technically shouldn't be possible but happened anyway, sits a report that future historians will study for centuries, trying to understand how two beings from a backwater planet accidentally reorganized galactic civilization through the simple application of friendliness and complete indifference to established power structures. The title of that report, for the record, is exactly what you'd expect. Why the apex predators of 7 worlds now fear a small girl and her honey badger.